Ever stay in a hotel and get that weird feeling? The kind of feeling that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You tell yourself it's just old pipes or the wind, but deep down, you know it's something else. Today, we're going to a place like that. A place where one room holds a secret so chilling, it's never been solved. This is the story of room 313. The hotel itself was unremarkable. You know the type: cheap, patterned carpet, fluorescent lights that hum and flicker, and that strange musty smell that seems baked into the very walls. It wasn't one of those grand, Gothic places with a famous ghost story attached. It was just a stopover, a place where tired travelers rest their heads for a night before moving on, leaving behind nothing but a few forgotten memories in empty rooms. Room 313 was just like any other, a forgettable box with a bed and a window, until the night of June 12, 1998. That was the night everything changed forever. The guest who checked into room 313 was a man named David Harper. He was 34 years old, described as a quiet man, traveling for business. He arrived a little after 9 in the evening. The front desk clerk later recalled that he specifically asked for a room far from the elevator, somewhere quiet. She remembered his politeness, the tired but genuine smile he offered, and how he thanked her twice for the key. Nothing about David Harper seemed unusual. He was just another weary traveler. Except, perhaps, for his eyes. The clerk mentioned they looked hollow, empty, as if he were looking at something far, far away. The next morning, the housekeeping staff knocked on the door of room 313. No answer. Following protocol, they used their master key to enter. The room was eerily still. The bed hadn't been slept in. The sheets were perfectly smooth. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the morning sun. The only sign of life was the bathroom light, which had been left on, casting a pale, sterile glow. And David Harper, he was gone. Vanished. At first, it seemed like a simple case of a guest checking out early without notice. But then, the staff started noticing the details. Small, unsettling things that didn't add up. The large mirror above the bathroom sink was cracked, a jagged line running right down the middle. It wasn't a simple fracture. It looked as if something had struck it with immense force, but from the inside, from behind the glass. On the bedside table, the digital alarm clock was frozen. It read 3:13 a.m., the power was on, but the numbers wouldn't change. And then they saw it, scrawled faintly on the wallpaper, just beside the headboard, were 4 chilling words: "Don't let him in." The police were called. They swarmed the room, dusting for prints, taking photographs, and filing a missing person report. The investigation was thorough. They scoured the woods surrounding the hotel, checked every gas station and diner for miles, and reviewed the grainy CCTV footage from the lobby over and over. But there was nothing. No footage of David leaving the hotel. No credit card transactions. No witnesses who saw him after he took the key. It was as if he had stepped into room 313 and simply ceased to exist, as if the room itself had swallowed him whole. Now, that should have been the end of the story. A tragic but ultimately unexplained disappearance. A cold case filed away in a dusty cabinet. But it wasn't. The story of room 313 was just beginning. Over the next few years, the hotel tried to move on. They replaced the mirror, painted over the writing on the wall, and continued to rent out room 313. But guests who stayed there started reporting strange occurrences. People would complain about the feeling of being watched, a sense of overwhelming dread that would settle over them the moment they closed the door. Some heard faint scratching noises coming from inside the walls. Others woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in a cold sweat, to find the room's clock inexplicably stopped at 3:13 a.m. The hotel management dismissed these as overactive imaginations, fueled by local gossip that had begun to spread about David Harper's disappearance. They were a business, after all, and the haunted room was bad for business. But the incidents kept escalating. In 2005, a young couple staying in the room called the front desk in a panic. The woman claimed she saw a man's reflection in the bathroom mirror, standing behind her. But when she spun around, there was no one there. Her partner, a skeptic, tried to calm her down. But then he saw it too, a fleeting, shadowy figure in the reflection, its eyes wide with terror. They packed their bags and left in the middle of the night, refusing to stay a second longer. A few years later, a businessman, much like David Harper, was staying in the room. He woke up abruptly, certain he had heard a voice, a faint, desperate whisper that seemed to come from the headboard itself. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was one of pure terror. He spent the rest of the night with the lights on, huddled in a chair, until the sun came up. The most disturbing event, however, happened to a cleaning lady who had worked at the hotel for over a decade. One afternoon, while preparing the room for a new guest, she was wiping down the wallpaper near the bed. As her cloth passed over the spot where the message had been, she said the wall became ice-cold to the touch. She pulled her hand back, startled. And then, she claimed, she heard it clearly, a man's voice, pleading, right in her ear. It said just one word, help. She ran from the room screaming and refused to ever set foot in room 313 again. After that incident, the hotel finally gave in. They could no longer ignore the mounting evidence and the sheer terror of their guests and staff. They stopped renting out room 313. The door was locked, and the Do Not Disturb sign was hung on the knob permanently. The room was officially abandoned, left to its secrets and its silence. But the story doesn't end there. Curiosity is a powerful thing. Over the years, urban explorers and paranormal investigators have become obsessed with the legend of room 313. Some have tried to sneak in, hoping to capture evidence of the paranormal or solve the mystery of what happened to David Harper. One group of ghost hunters allegedly managed to get inside a few years ago. They set up their equipment, EMF meters, audio recorders, night vision cameras. For hours, nothing happened. The room was silent, still. Disappointed, they were about to pack up when their equipment suddenly went haywire. BM. The EMF meter spiked into the red, beeping erratically. The temperature in the room plummeted, and on their audio recorder, they captured a voice. When they played it back, clearing away the static, they could hear a man whispering, over and over again. The same 4 words found on the wall years ago. Don T let him in. But then, a second voice emerged. A voice that was deeper, harsher, and not human. It said something that made their blood run cold. Too late. They fled the hotel that night, uploading their findings online, where the audio clip went viral among paranormal enthusiasts. To this day, room 313 remains locked. The hotel, now under new management, denies the stories, calling them urban legends. But the local townspeople know better. They know that something happened in that room on June 12, 1998, something that left an indelible scar. What really happened to David Harper? Was he a victim of foul play? Did he simply walk away and start a new life? Or did he encounter something in that room? Something that was waiting in the dark? Who was he warning us not to let in? Was it a person? Or was it something else entirely? Something that has now claimed room 313 as its own? The truth may never be known. But one thing is certain. Whatever happened in that room has left a permanent echo, a chilling reminder that some doors are better left unopened, and some mysteries are best left unsolved. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you have any theories about what happened in room 313, Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the mysterious and unexplained. Stay safe, and always check the mirrors. A few months passed, and the memory of David Harper began to fade, but room 313 wasn't finished. A new guest, a woman named Melissa Green, checked in. She was just looking for a quiet getaway. She lasted 2 nights. On the morning of her 3rd day, the hotel staff were startled by blood-curdling screams. Melissa came sprinting down the hallway, barefoot, her body shaking uncontrollably. She was almost incoherent, but they managed to calm her down enough to ask what had happened. She said she'd woken up in the dead of night to find a man standing by the bathroom door. He wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound. He was just ... watching her. She told them she couldn't see his face, that it was lost in shadow, a void where features should have been. Manager, trying to identify a potential intruder, showed her a photograph of the hotel's recent tragic guest, David Harper. The moment her eyes landed on the photo, Melissa Green fainted. That was the final straw. The hotel officially sealed room 313. The sign on the door read under renovation, but everyone knew the real reason. It was an attempt to contain the story, to silence the whispers that had started to poison the hotel's atmosphere. The staff spoke in hushed tones about the strange smell that would sometimes seep from under the Dora coppery, metallic scent like wet iron. They talked about the lights inside the room flickering on and off, even though the power had been cut. And the most unsettling rumor of all, Sid, the one about voices calling your name as you walked past the door late at night, a faint, desperate whisper from the other side. But you can't seal a story. Legends have a life of their own, and this one was just getting started. Human curiosity is a powerful force, and when a place is forbidden, it only becomes more alluring. The story of room 313 went underground, passed from employee to employee, from local to tourist, becoming a piece of local folklore. Years went by. In 2011, the hotel, which had fallen into a state of disrepair, changed ownership. It was purchased by a young, ambitious, independent filmmaker named Aaron Cross. Aaron didn't buy it to run a hotel. He bought it as a massive, real-life film set. He had a passion project, a documentary series about real haunted places. He'd heard the local legend of room 313 during his research and knew, instantly, that it had to be his premiere episode. Now, Aaron was the furthest thing from a true believer. He was logical, methodical, a complete skeptic. To him, every ghost story was just a combination of overactive imaginations, environmental factors, and misunderstood science. He believed every mystery had a rational explanation, and he was determined to find the one for room 313. He arrived at the old hotel with his gear: 2 high-definition cameras, a professional sound recorder, and his friend, Lucas. Lucas was a sound engineer who'd worked on a few indie horror films, so he knew a thing or two about creating a spooky atmosphere. But unlike Aaron, Lucas was a bit more open-minded about the unknown. With a crowbar and a bit of effort, they broke the seal on room 313, opening it for the first time in over a decade. A wave of stale, musty air hit them. Everything was preserved in a thick layer of dust, exactly as the police had left it years ago. The bed was unmade, the furniture was covered in white sheets, and the mirror on the wall was still shattered, its cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. Aaron pointed his camera at the faint, ghostly outlines of the words David had scrolled on the wallpaper. It was all perfect, cinematic gold. But then they noticed something that sent a small, cold shiver down their spines. On the bedside table, covered in dust, just like everything else, was the digital clock, and it was still frozen at 3:13 a.m. Aaron, ever the skeptic, just laughed it off. Must have had some cheap, long-lasting batteries, he joked, trying to lighten the mood. But Lucas didn't laugh. He just stood there, his eyes scanning the room. "Dude," he said quietly, "the air in here feels ... heavy. Like, really heavy." Aaron just rolled his eyes and told him to start setting up the sound equipment. They spent the next several hours filming. They got all the shots they needed. Sweeping pans of the dusty room, close-ups of the broken mirror, interviews with Aaron explaining the history of the place. The whole time, nothing happened. Not a single bump in the night, no strange noises, no ghostly apparitions. Aaron was starting to feel a little disappointed, convinced the whole story was just a dud. By late evening they packed up, exhausted, and headed back to their temporary editing suite in another part of the hotel to review the day's footage. And that's when their skepticism was shattered. They were scrubbing through the clips, looking for the best shots. They came to a long, static take of the empty room, one Aaron had set up to capture the atmosphere. As they watched, Lucas suddenly yelled, "Whoa, whoa, go back." Aaron rewound the footage. There, in the reflection of the cracked mirror, was a flicker of movement. It was almost imperceptible, just a few frames of something dark passing by. "It's just a trick of the light, a lens flare or something," Aaron said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Lucas wasn't convinced. "Slow it down," he insisted. "Play it frame by frame." Aaron did as he was told. As the image crawled across the screen, they both leaned in closer, and then they saw it. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was a figure, a blurry, indistinct shape of a person in the reflection. A chill ran down Aaron's back as he realized the truly terrifying part. The reflection wasn't of him, and it wasn't of Lucas. The camera was pointed at an empty section of the room. The reflection was of someone who wasn't there. The next night, driven by a mix of skepticism and the thrill of the chase, Aaron and Lucas returned to room 313. They set up their equipment again, determined to capture definitive proof. They waited. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an eerie silence. Then, at exactly 3:13 a.m., it happened. The main recording device glitched. Its screen flickered violently, displaying a mess of static and distorted colors before going dark. At that exact moment, Lucas grabbed Aaron's arm, his eyes wide. He swore he heard whispering. A low, raspy male voice repeating the same chilling phrase over and over. "Don't let him in." Before they could process what he'd heard, the door to the hallway, which they had firmly shut, creaked open on its own. A sliver of dark corridor was visible. Aaron, trying to mask his growing fear with nervous laughter, picked up the camera. "All right, let's see who's out there," he said, his voice wavering slightly. He kept the camera rolling as he approached the door. He pushed it open, expecting to find a prankster or a hotel staff member. But there was nothing, just an empty, dark hallway and the distant, lonely hum of a vending machine down the corridor. He quickly closed the door, this time making sure to engage the deadbolt. They both tried to laugh it off as a draft or a faulty latch, but the nervous energy in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Later that night, the terror followed them into their sleep. Aaron woke up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, his heart pounding against his ribs. He'd just had the most vivid, terrifying dream of his life. In it, he was standing in a room with no doors, surrounded by an infinite number of mirrors. In every single reflection, he saw himself, but it wasn't him. It was an older, broken version. His face was covered in bruises, his clothes were torn, and blood, thick and dark, trickled from his eyes. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He was trapped. When he finally managed to shake himself awake, the images were seared into his mind. He stumbled into the living area to tell Lucas, only to find his friend already awake, looking pale and shaken. Before Aaron could even get the words out, Lucas looked at him and said, "I had a dream. I was in a room full of mirrors. It was the exact same nightmare. That was the last straw. The shared dream, the disembodied voice, the door opening on its own, it was too much." They packed their gear in a frantic haze as the sun began to rise. Aaron swore he would never set foot in that hotel, let alone that room, ever again. They left without even checking out, abandoning their investigation for good. For a few months, it seemed like the story would end there. Two amateur ghost hunters scared off by a series of strange coincidences. But then, the footage started to appear online. Not the full, unedited tapes, but short, corrupted clips uploaded to various forums by anonymous users. The original files, according to Lucas, had been mysteriously corrupted, making them almost impossible to view. But in the few surviving fragments that surfaced, the audio was the most disturbing part. Beneath a thick layer of static, a faint but steady heartbeat could be heard. And woven into the white noise, a man's voice whispered, unintelligible and frantic. Audio experts and online sleuths tried to clean it up. Some claim that if you listen closely, filtering out the static, you can hear a new voice. A different one, saying, "He's in here." The mystery only deepened from there. Shortly after the clips went viral, Aaron Cross vanished. One day he was there, trying to put the incident behind him, and the next he was gone. No note, no explanation. His family and friends had no idea where he went. When questioned, Lucas became withdrawn and defensive. He claimed Aaron had simply quit filmmaking and moved away, refusing to talk about room 313 or what happened that night. As for the hotel, its string of bad luck continued. It changed owners again, but its reputation was permanently tarnished. Then, in 2014, the building burned down in a massive fire. Investigators could never determine the cause, ruling it as inconclusive, but the strangest detail of all was discovered in the ashes. The entire hotel was a charred ruin, except for one small section. Room 313, though smoke-damaged, was the only part of the building that remained structurally intact, untouched by the flames. Of course, skeptics have their explanations for everything. They argue it's all a series of elaborate coincidences. That David Harper, the original guest, probably just ran away to start a new life. That the cryptic message on the mirror was a hoax left by a previous guest. That Aaron and Lucas staged the whole thing for attention, and Aaron's disappearance was part of the act. But those who have seen the raw, fragmented footage, the people who've spent hours analyzing the audio and the shaky camera work claim otherwise. They say the fear in Aaron's voice isn't acting. The panic in their eyes is too genuine. The story feels too real. And maybe that's where the real horror of this story lies. It's not necessarily about ghosts or vengeful spirits. It's about the authenticity of fear itself. How it can take root in a place. How it can spread from person to person like a virus. Once you hear a story like this, a part of it sticks with you. You find yourself glancing a little longer at your own reflection in a dark window. You start paying more attention to the creaks and groans of your house in the middle of the night. The story plants a seed of doubt, a whisper of what if. There's a theory in parapsychology called residual energy, or the stone tape theory. It suggests that intense emotions, things like profound grief, terror, or pain, can be so powerful that they imprint themselves onto the physical environment. Like a recording, they get burned into the very fabric of a place, replaying over and over for those sensitive enough to perceive them. Maybe room 313 wasn't haunted by the ghost of David Harper. Maybe it was haunted * him. Maybe what Aaron and Lucas experienced was an echo, a psychic residue of the absolute terror and despair. David felt in his final moments before that clock on the wall stopped ticking forever. No one knows for sure what happened to David Harper that night, but digging into his past reveals a tragic backstory. Police records show that he had recently suffered an unimaginable loss. His wife had died in a sudden, violent car accident just 6 months earlier. He was traveling for work, supposedly trying to move on, to escape the constant reminders of his grief back home. When investigators searched his belongings in room 313, they found a photograph of her in his suitcase. It was folded and unfolded so many times that the paper was torn at the creases. Tucked inside the suitcase was also a letter he'd written to her, a letter he never mailed. It was filled with pain and longing, but it was the final line that sent a chill down everyone's spine. It read, "If there's a way to see you again, I'll find it." What if he did? When you think about it, there's something deeply, tragically human in that thought. The desire to cross the ultimate boundary, to tear a hole between the world of the living and the world of the dead, just to feel a little less alone. That might be the true emotional core of this entire mystery. We label it a horror story because it frightens us, but beneath the fear, it's a story about longing. It's about grief that's been twisted into a dangerous obsession. It's about love decaying into something much, much darker. So, maybe David Harper wasn't taken by some malevolent entity that was already lurking in room 313. Maybe, in his desperate grief, he opened the door himself. Maybe he found a way to reach out into the darkness, and something reached back. And perhaps that S, the real reason why every person who stayed in that room afterwards experienced the same things, the disembodied voices, the terrifying dreams of the mirrored room. It isn't a traditional haunting. It's a repetition, an echo of one man's desperate choice, replaying for anyone who dares to spend the night. It's the memory of his grief, now imprinted on the walls, waiting for the next guest to check in. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as chilling as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Stay curious and stay safe. Tour what truly happened in room 313. That's the question that pulls you in, but the answers, they don't bring comfort. They just dig deeper into that cold place inside all of us where fear lives. The story isn't a straight line. It's a tangled mess of grief, paranoia, and something else, ... Something that waits in the dark corners of quiet rooms. It starts, as these things often do, with a man named David, a man broken by loss, desperate for a sign, any sign, that the person he loved wasn't truly gone. He checks into the old Grand Hotel, into a room that has a reputation. Room 313. It's just a room, he tells himself. 4 walls, a bed, a window overlooking a gray city street. But the silence in this room is different. It's heavy, watchful. He feels it the moment he closes the door. That first night, he sits on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning under his weight. He's just staring at the wall, at the faded floral wallpaper, when he hears it. A soft scratching sound from inside the wall. Like a mouse, he thinks. Or rats. But the sound isn't frantic. It's methodical, rhythmic, scratch. Pause, scratch. It almost sounds like writing. He presses his ear against the cold plaster, trying to make sense of it. The sound stops. The silence that rushes back in is somehow worse. The next day, David becomes obsessed. He's not looking for a ghost. He's looking for an explanation. He checks for faulty wiring, for pipes, for any rational source of the noise. He finds nothing. He talks to the hotel staff, but they just offer tight-lipped smiles and change the subject. It's an old building, they say. It has its quirks, but he sees the look in their eyes. They know. They just won't say what the second night is when things escalate. The scratching returns, louder this time. It's joined by a faint whisper, a wisp of sound that seems to coil around the edges of the room. He can't make out the words, but the tone. It's filled with a profound sadness. It's the sound of someone trying to speak through a shattered throat. David, instead of being terrified, feels a pull, a desperate, irrational hope. Could it be her? Is she trying to reach him? He speaks her name into the empty room, his voice a raw whisper. Is that you? The scratching stops. The whispering ceases. For a moment, there is absolute, deafening silence. Then, a single, sharp knock comes from the inside of the closet door. This is where the story splits. This is where you have to decide what you believe. Some say David was a victim, a man tormented by a malevolent entity that latched onto his grief. Others whisper that David wasn't just a guest in room 313, he was a catalyst. Did he bring his sorrow into that room and give the darkness a name? Did his desperation feed whatever was already there, making it stronger? Consider Aaron Cross, a paranormal investigator who stayed in the room years before David. Aaron was a skeptic, a man who built his career on debunking hoaxes. He set up his equipment team, MF meters, audio recorders, thermal cameras, and waited for hours. Nothing happened. He was about to pack it all in, dismiss it as another local legend. Then he glanced at the mirror above the dresser. For a split second, his reflection wasn't his own. It was him, but his face was pale, his eyes wide with terror, and a trickle of blood was running from the corner of his mouth. He blinked, and it was gone. It was just his own tired face staring back. Was it a glimpse into another dimension? A warning? Or was it just his own subconscious, projecting his deepest fears onto the silvered glass? The line between a genuine haunting and a psychological breakdown is terrifyingly thin. Our minds are built to protect us, but they have a fatal flaw. They love to flirt with the abyss. We stand at the edge of a cliff and feel the urge to jump. We stare into an empty, dark room and half expect something to stare back. Room 313 seems to understand this. It preys on that part of us. Perhaps the curse of the room isn't about specters and ghouls. Maybe it's about what happens when loneliness becomes so absolute, so suffocating, that the silence itself starts to feel like a presence. It's what happens when you stare at your own reflection for so long that it finally starts talking back. For David, that knock from the closet was an invitation. He opened the door. There was nothing inside but a few wire hangers and the faint, musty smell of mothballs. But the atmosphere in the room had changed. It was charged, electric. He knew he wasn't alone anymore. The whispers returned that night, and this time he could almost make out a word. His name, the way she used to say it. He spent a week in that room. He stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He just sat and listened, communicating with knocks and whispers. He was convinced he had bridged the gap between life and death. He believed he had found her. But the other guests on the floor started to complain. They heard walking in the hallway when no one was there. They heard a woman sobbing behind the wall of 313. The hotel manager finally had to intervene. He used a master key to enter the room. He found David sitting on the floor, emaciated, talking animatedly to an empty corner. The room was freezing cold, despite the heating being on full blast. There were words scratched all over the walls, hundreds of them, overlapping, chaotic, mostly one repeating phrase. She's here. David was removed from the hotel. The room was closed for renovations. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, a fire broke out on the third floor. It started, inexplicably, in room 313. The place was gutted. During the investigation, sifting through the charred debris, they found something that made the fire marshal's blood run cold. A single, scorched piece of wallpaper had survived, protected somehow by a fallen piece of ceiling. Underneath the layers of soot, in a small, neat handwriting that didn't match David's frantic scrawls, were 3 simple words. He found her. No one could explain it. And frankly, no one wanted to. The hotel was eventually torn down, but the legend of room 313 didn't get buried with the rubble. It lives on. People who have never even been to that city, people who only heard the story, report strange occurrences. They dream of the room, describing the same unsettling details: the buzzing fluorescent light in the bathroom, the faint smell of ozone and old metal, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps pacing from the door towards the bed. And when they jolt awake, hearts pounding, they look at their phones. The time is always the same, 3:13 a.m. Is it a coincidence? Mass hysteria? Maybe. But if you've ever truly lost someone, you understand the pull. You know that desperate, all-consuming desire to just have one more moment, to hear one more word, to open that one forbidden door. The danger is, if you push that door open, you might find someone waiting for you on the other side. Or you might find something that is simply pretending to be them, wearing their memory like a mask. The real horror of room 313 isn't about ghosts. It's about a fundamental human need, the need for connection, the refusal to accept loss. It's the kind of desperate love that drives people to make impossible bargains with the darkness. And if you look closely, maybe every haunted place is just a monument to that kind of love, the kind that refuses to let go, even when it's destroying everything around it. Because sometimes, the most terrifying hauntings don't come from some other side. They come from within us. They are born from the memories we refuse to bury, from the grief that becomes so powerful it warps our perception of reality, turning a reflection into a real person, a draft of cold air into a touch. And that's why room 313 still exists, not as bricks and mortar, but as an idea, a chilling reminder that some doors, once we open them in our minds, can never truly be closed again. The real question isn't what happened in that physical room. It's what part of you, what part of your own fear and longing, is still living there, waiting in the dark.